Hello, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be reading and ranking the 2024 nominees for the Goodreads Choice Awards in the category of romance. It is my 6th year doing this video, and as I say, every year this is my favorite video that I make, and I am so excited to be doing it. I'm going to be vlogging my reactions to the 5 books that I did not read before the start of the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I'm going to sit here in this chair and tell you about the 15 books that I have read prior to the Choice Awards. It's going to be all mixed up as we go, and I'm going to be ranking the books as we go from best to worst. And at the end of the video, I'm going to be telling you my predictions for what I believe are going to make the top 10 down from the top 20 and what I think the winner of the Goodreads Choice Awards is going to be, plus what should have made the top 10 and my personal winner. But without further ado, let's get into it. We have a lot of books to talk about. Moms against cartoon sexy covers are going to be mad at this one because Hannah Grace has managed to write a 5-star romance. This one is about Hallie and Henry, and I wish that I could say that this is the last that we're going to see of alliterative first names for heroes and heroines. Sadly, that is not the case. But Hallie, our heroine, is an eldest daughter bookworm trying to juggle parental expectations, college, and the various jobs and obligations that she has. Henry is the captain of her hockey team who is, say it with me, failing a class and needs a tutor. And yes, technically, overachieving Hallie does help Henry get his grades up in a particular class, but this book isn't your standard nerdy girl, tutors, sports star romance. It's more of an acquaintances to lovers thing, where the man is extremely respectful and good at communicating, and the heroine undergoes growth alongside her romance. It's a kind of book that's hard to be mad at, and I certainly was not, which is why I'm giving this book 5 stars, and since it's the first book we're talking about, it's getting the top spot. Can I be honest with you? I relish the opportunity to come up with one-liners for these videos. It gives me a sick thrill to sit down at my laptop and click-clack away, finding the perfect sexual euphemism for whatever situation that I'm trying to describe, but sometimes the nominees for these videos are actually good. And you're gonna notice that the snark levels are at an all-time low in this video because I hate to say it, I like the majority of the books here, and I really cannot think of anything snarky to say about This Could Be Us by Kennedy Ryan. It's about a woman named Soledad who at the start of the story has a seemingly idyllic life. She is married to a man she loves with 3 beautiful daughters. Except we learn pretty early on that the man is actually trash, and the life that Soledad has been living is based on some pretty large and unforgivable lies. She's left to pick up the pieces of her life whilst also caring for her 3 daughters, finding a job outside of the home for the first time in a really long time so she can pay the bills, but also satisfy her soul. And of course, along the way, she finds her perfect match in the one man that she should not be falling in love with. This book is the antithesis to many books that I picked up in 2024. It is not riddled with 15 variations of whole cramming or choruses of good girl. It is a well-crafted, deeply emotional character journey and soulmate level romance. The kind where at the end you're practically raising your fist Rocky style in triumph because you are so happy about the journey that you have gone on alongside Soledad. And whilst I am not here to yuck anyone's yum, these are the kinds of romances that I want to see more of in 2025. This was a 5-star, this is one of my best books of the year, and it's going to skip and hop in front of Daydream. Some books are made for savoring, and some books are made for reading at the beach and forgetting about once your toes are no longer in the sand. The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren is mostly the latter. It's about a disgraced grocery store heir who needs a wife for 5 years so he can collect on his rather large inheritance. Good news is he's been married since college to a woman who was seeking student housing and was able to snag better accommodations by being married, except she thought they got divorced upon graduation. No matter, her husband, who she again doesn't really realize is still her husband, is going to share some of his inheritance with her if she agrees to come to his sister's wedding on an island and convince his family that they have somehow been happily married this entire time. It's a little bit Succession, a lot of silliness, though markedly less fun, I would say, than The On a Honeymooners, if you've read that one. It's a book that I think managed to be fairly sincere while not being overly serious. For the characters as bland as their names, yes, kind of, but I wasn't mad when they made sweet beachy love and West stuck it to his family. Fun fact, there are at least 3 men in 3 different books on this list, all named Weston. Anyway, 4 stars, and let's put this at the end of our rankings. I know that they say love conquers all, but I think even love would take exception to the hero of a romance novel hitting the heroine's sister with the car and like ending her life. And yes, sure, technically Helen, our heroine's sister, jumps in front of the car, but like, you see how this could put us in a bit of an uncomfortable and, dare I say, unconquerable situation. This book is about our heroine Helen, who writes a series of YA novels that are being adapted to the silver screen. She is involved in the writing, and guess what? So is her sister's killer, Grant. Helen and Grant went to school together. They have a little bit of history amongst themselves. Helen is not totally over the loss of her sister because her parents are not over it either. And Grant is also not totally over accidentally killing someone. And to top it off, Grant and Helen kind of butt heads because they disagree on the content of the TV show and kind of how things should go. Sparks fly, baloney ponies are ridden. This book for me had trolley problem levels of dilemma. Sure, Helen might be able to overcome her issue with Grant, but Helen's parents are openly hostile to the concept of Grant for the entire book, to the point where I want was stressed out reading this, just wondering how Helen was going to break the news to her parents that, hey, actually I'm fucking the guy that killed my sister. I just don't think like dread is a welcome emotion for me personally when I'm reading a romance. Just a little bit too much of a weird / awful setup to work. That being said, the writing itself was not awful, and it actually makes me curious to see what this author might put out next. So while this wasn't for me, I'm not totally willing to say like I'm never reading anything by her again. You know what I mean? I gave this one 3 stars, which puts it at the end of our rankings for now. First book that I'm picking up to vlog for this video, King of Sloth by Anna Huang. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the last video that I did like this last year also was started with an Anna Huang book. I thought, carry on the tradition. This one, I'm not hating. I don't think that I enjoyed the last Anna Huang book that I read, and I'm pretty sure the last one I read was actually The Striker, but the last one I read in the series I didn't enjoy. This one I'm actually enjoying, and it's very different, I would say, than pretty much anything I've read by her. So this book follows our hero Javier and our heroine Sloan. Sloan is a PR person. She owns her own PR company. She really likes being in control. This is definitely like a reverse Grumpy Sunshine or a like Black Cat Golden Retriever kind of romance. Sloan has been hired by Javier's father to make sure he stays in line because Javier is the heir to a really big fortune. And I don't know if at the time his father is in bad shape in terms of like his health, but at this point in the story at the beginning of the book, we know that Javier's father is in pretty bad shape and that there's a chance that Javier is going to have to take over for his dad. And he's not looking forward to this, ignoring all of his problems and drinking and partying and whatever. At the start of the story, our heroine's like, you know what? No, we need to go to an award ceremony for your dad. He's not going to be there because he is like hospitalized at this point, or maybe is on hospice. This kind of sparks a chain of events, basically. Javier and Sloan end up going on this like short-lived little vacation together. They kind of learn a little bit about each other. And then from there, they get kind of unexpectedly called to Javier's father's bedside as he is passing away. And we learn that Javier needs to become CEO of a company, not necessarily his dad's company, within the next 6 months. Otherwise, he will lose all of his inheritance. So our hero decides that he's actually going to get his life together and find something that he's good at. Because that is sort of our hero's growth journey, or at least I believe it's going to be over the course of the story. He does not believe that he is ever going to be good at something, so he never tries. Or he feels like everything he's ever tried, he's never the best at. So like, why continue on with it? It feels like a constant failure in his life. Part of this is brought on by his like childhood trauma, which like I'm not going to get into and spoil that for you, but he's definitely a damaged hero. And our heroine also has some family shit going on. She is like so on the outs with her family at this point that she can't even visit her little half-sister who's like 9. And so there's a part at the beginning of the book where she like sneaks into a family home to like visit her sister. Yeah, this one is melancholy. This one is more emotional than some of Anna Huang's other stuff, and I think I like it. Don't know that this is the most entertaining, the most fun, the most like compulsively readable book, but at the same time, I'm not really wanting to put it down, which is a problem that I feel like I've been having with this author lately. I am enjoying the characterization of both hero and heroine. I'm very curious to see how they kind of grow together, and I could see both of their flaws kind of complementing each other, even from the beginning. He is definitely someone who can bring her down a couple of notches, get her to chill. She is someone who can definitely help encourage him, honestly be kind of like a role model or inspiration to him in some ways, I think, because she is successful and she's owned her own business. I'm curious to see where this goes. I feel like this book is only going to like really fall apart for me if last 50%, the next 50% of this book comes extremely boring or does something really out of left field and crazy. Welcome to my glam studio. We are going to talk about the ending of King of Sloth by Anna Huang. I actually didn't hate this book, and it is really relieving to be able to tell you that because now it's the first one that I'm reading for this here video, and I did not have luck with the last book that I read in this series. I wouldn't say that this was mind-blowing in any way. I wouldn't say that this was my favorite romance. It's definitely not going to be super high on the list as I feel like the video goes on. That being said, this is a 3-star read for me. This felt very satisfying in the way that it concluded. The plot lines that Anna Huang included, especially some of the B plots, I feel like got resolved really nicely, and I felt like the conflicts, especially in this book, were really realistic for these characters. Now, did I love the conflict? Not necessarily, but I do think it really fit with these two characters, and it was really cool seeing our heroine maintaining her boundaries when it came to her family, but also learning how to maybe be more emotionally available in her romantic relationships and in relationships with people that she chooses. The only thing that was missing for me, I mean, there were a couple of things that were missing for me, but I'd say the main thing that was missing for me was the friendship component. Like, yes, we do get to see both of these characters make friends and or maintain friendships, but I feel like a big thing in Anna Huang's books that I have loved in the past is her ability to write these friend groups that seem fun and realistic, make you excited, I guess, for heroes and heroines for, you know, next books in the series. I feel like she does a good job at like setting things up normally. And this one I didn't really feel that way quite as much. much. I also felt like it wasn't as swoony as I was really hoping for. Again, considering the luck that I've had with this author in the past like few releases she's had, this one was plotted really tightly and I didn't feel like there was a lot of nonsense, so I really can't complain. So 3 stars. I'm going to put this one, I think, between The Paradise Problem and How to End a Love Story. The only thing worse than being bad is being forgettable, which is an honor I never thought I'd be bestowing on an Elsie Silver book, but Wild Love just did not do it for me. We've got a heroine who, at the beginning of the book, is fired from her job after reporting her own assault at work. She's really devastated because she put in so much work to get a graduate degree and to get her dream job, and now she's returning home a little bit devastated and trying to pick up the pieces of her life and figure out her next move. And while she's there, she reconnects with her brother's best friend and serial baby gravy donator, Ford, who has always been a little bit grumpy towards her. Now, Ford is back home after making billions, and he is going to take some of these billions and open up his own recording studio. I think he made all of his money like selling an app, and now he's like, I'm gonna follow my passions. Things get a little sticky, realizing now is a poor choice of words, when his biological daughter shows up asking to be taken care of while his biological daughter's mother is grieving the loss of her father. Like I said, Ford donated some of his holiday icing back in the day and apparently has an unknown offspring. I mean, one at the beginning of this book, could be more, who knows. The latter is really the most memorable part of this book, which is why I'm like harping on that so much. That and like the banging in the wall paint scene that happens near the end. It wasn't that this book was totally devoid of emotion, I was just expecting more. I wanted to see our heroine go through her full character journey and character arc, finding herself and maybe finding a new profession to get excited about, job to get excited about. Instead, she just like kind of decides she's going to work for Ford without us really getting to see the process she goes through mentally to get there. And Ford is thrust into new parenthood and also the opening of his recording studio, and yet that again kind of falls to the wayside. It left me just really wanting more, again, which is not something I often feel when I'm reading an Elsie Silver book. She usually covers all her bases, and like, again, I get that this is a romance, but romance can and always has been capable of doing more than just having 2 people get together so that they can mash latex paint into each other's holes. It's not awful, it was just a little bit of a letdown considering how much I've enjoyed other books from this author. This one is a 3-star for me, and it's going between King of Sloth and How to End a Love Story. It really doesn't get more millennial than being so attracted to someone because of their Reddit post that you message them and start flirting. Just kidding, the hero and heroine of this book are named Justin and Emma. Okay, maybe I can be snarky about books I love. Just for the Summer is my favorite book of the year. It is about 2 people going through incredibly tough situations, figuring their shit out so they can be together. The ultimate romance formula, if you ask me. After DMing Justin because of his so funny and charming Reddit post, Emma the travel nurse decides she is going to move herself to Minnesota for 6 weeks and date Justin in a very casual way. Kind of seeing where things lead, but not expecting anything serious. However, neither is expecting how real things get really quickly, because Emma's demons come to town literally, and Justin's custody of his younger siblings is fast approaching. Both situations, of course, complicating the romance that is burgeoning between Emma and Justin. This is what I'm talking about, people. Real world romance. Hard situations, bad relationships with parents, complicated sibling relationships, trust issues, just to name a few, but all able to be conquered by love because the people in the romance are willing to work on themselves and figure their shit out. This book is gorgeous, it made me cry, and it's one that I feel like is really hard to sell based on summary alone, but rest assured the writing is incredibly well done. Depth of emotion is there, characters are well realized and incredibly flawed. 5 stars, Hall of Fame, and this one is going to sneak in front of This Could Be Us, but frankly, both of these are tied in my eyes for first place. You know, the purple sex toy bouncing along the carousel at baggage claim should have clued me into the fact that the pairing wasn't going to be for me. I, like most people, really adored Red, White, and Royal Blue, which I believe actually won a Goodreads Choice Award back when it came out, but I was less impressed with One Last Stop, so I had no idea what to expect when going into the pairing, and I think that this might be my one last stop with Casey's books. This one is about 2 bisexual exes who embark on a European food and wine tour. They've been broken up for some time, and I believe before they broke up, they were expected to go on this tour together. It ended up getting canceled, and I think a year or 2 later they're going on this trip and they don't realize that the other person is going at the same time, so they end up having to like come back into contact with each other, face the feelings that they used to have for each other, because I guess we're not done here. And whilst they are on this trip, because they're not willing to acknowledge their feelings for each other, they are going to sleep their way across Europe, having a sex competition, if you will. And I'll be honest, I didn't get far enough to actually read the hookup competition, which I am kind of grateful for, because all signs really pointed to me not enjoying this book from the beginning. It's a second chance romance, which I think is one of the hardest tropes to pull off in romance, and it's especially hard to pull off when your characters are not likable and when I don't understand their motivations. Maybe both of those things would have become more clear to me if I had continued on with the book. I have to wave the purple silicone flag of defeat here. This is going to the end of the list where the DNFs live. Play Along is the title of the next one I'm going to talk about, which is a perfect name for a book where you kind of have to suspend your disbelief just a little bit, right? Because our heroine is a medical doctor who ends up interviewing to be a medical doctor for an MLB team. She's instead offered a trainer position because I guess women understand medicine even though they went to school for it, and she accepts this role for the plot of the book. And the hero is a shortstop for this MLB team that the heroine, works for, and he is obsessed with her from the first moment he sees her and takes the opportunity to marry her in Vegas when they're both very, very drunk. And they stay married because plot reasons or something like that. Honestly, I don't care, because silly shit doesn't matter if it's well written. And Liz Tomford is so capable as an author that she made this unlikely romance for me work. Kennedy, our heroine, is a bit stoic and has a lot of hurt from some past failed relationships, and Isaiah, while he doesn't have a lot of trauma from relationships, does have trauma in his past because of some of the family relationships that he's had. So watching their romance unfold was so sweet and so satisfying despite the silly setup. I give this book 5 stars. There really wasn't anything about this book that I didn't like, but it didn't quite reach the levels of some of my other favorites this year. It's going between This Could Be Us and Daydream. New bombshell has entered the villa, and that bombshell is Pepper, who is actually always right there behind me as I film. I started Lies and Weddings, okay? I'm 50-ish% into this exceedingly long audiobook. Why, God, is this on the list? I really don't know. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think this is probably the most questionable choice, and not questionable in that it's a terrible book, though I'm not enjoying it. It's questionable in that this is not a romance, and Kevin Kwan doesn't really write romance. He writes fiction, and it's fun fiction, don't get me wrong, but nothing about his books really scream romance to me, besides there being 1, maybe 2 romance subplots in his books. He writes frothy general fiction, okay? So this book is about a family, I guess. The matriarch of the family, I think her name is Arabella. She is trying to marry off all of her children because while she lives in England and is married to like a viscount, the family is in fact broke. And so she's having to marry off her children to people so that they will be taken care of in the life of luxury that they've grown accustomed to. And I think she's married off all of her daughters, question mark. She's trying to find someone now to marry off her son to. There's a bunch of different weddings that we're attending. There are a bunch of different side characters that we're getting to know. The main people you need to know are Arabella, Rufus, and Eden. Rufus is Arabella's son. Eden is a friend of the family, and she's a doctor. Her dad is a doctor, and I think her dad used to be the doctor for their family or something like that. Arabella and Rufus and all of those people. But Eden and Rufus grew up together, and I'm thinking the vibe that we're getting here is that they're going to end up together, like the girl next door sort of romance, even though, again, Arabella is trying to marry off Rufus so that their family is not destitute, because he is, of course, the son, and he's going to take over the title, and blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of like a modern historical, if you think about it like that. I mean, there's no, historical vibes at all, right? It's just a contemporary romance, but you've got, again, the fact that, you've got this hero, he's got to marry someone of money so that he can, carry on the family lineage or whatever, and, the family estate. So what I'm not enjoying about this book is what I didn't enjoy about Crazy Rich Asians. I enjoyed Crazy Rich Asians in that we were getting to see a few different cultures at play, which I thought was exciting. I liked going to different countries and having a good time. Every time I film, he gets so excited about it. But in that book and in this book, there are just so many characters, and there are unfortunately quite a few characters who are just very grating personality-wise. I'm listening to the audiobook for Lies and Weddings, and the narrator is doing a phenomenal job, because I'm sure if I read it physically, I would also think that Arabella was exceedingly shrill. But holy shit, listening to this woman bitch to her child about being upper crust enough, it's grating for sure. It's very grating. That, and again, some of the side characters are also irritating. It's not super enjoyable, and I'm liking the moments that I'm getting of Rufus and Eden. I think this guy, is his name Freddie or something? There's another guy kind of in the mix who Eden has befriended at one of these weddings. There's stuff going on. There are people that are interesting. There are people that are fun. I wouldn't call this a romance despite all of that, and I'm really why is this book in this category? Not only is it not a romance, I didn't hear anybody talking about this book, and I know that this is a really popular author. I'm not doubting his popularity, but I didn't hear any of my romance reader friends talking about this book, so very surprised that it made it on the nominee list. I forget to film a final clip for Lies and Weddings. I sure did. Do I remember much about the ending of this book since reading it? No, but I am going to try to let you know what I thought about it. Also, hello to my kneecaps. I film in shorts. This book was fine. I feel like the romance of this book kind of took a back seat to the other elements elements. There was way too much emphasis on the reveals at the end of the book for me to be totally satisfied, again, with this as a romance, though obviously hero and heroine, Rufus and Eden, do kind of end up together, which is, I guess you could say, satisfying. It just wasn't something that I personally love. I don't think this is a book that a lot of readers are going to resonate with either. Like, if you love Kevin Kwan's writing, you love Crazy Rich Asians, I think this is more of the same from him, which is great. But is it really that great? I feel like I wanted something new, something different, something perhaps a little bit less complicated with fewer characters, with more emphasis on the romance, but also it's like, what was he setting out and intending to write? I don't think he was intending necessarily for this to be categorized as a romance. So again, kind of an odd inclusion here. And I think ultimately this is a 3-star read for me. And this one belongs between How to End a Love Story and The Pairing. I like when authors do not care about their audiences and just write whatever the hell they want. Might seem rich coming from someone who really didn't enjoy The Pairing, but Not in Love by Ellie Hazelwood is unlike anything else she's ever written. The other stuff she's written has been incredibly well received by romance readers. So to write something completely different, I think, is a really big, bold move that I personally and probably unpopularly think paid off. Not Love is about a food scientist named Rue who absolutely loves her job because her boss rocks and it provides financial stability that she did not have as a kid. She is a little bit different. She's not a galaxy legging wearing perpetually swooning gal. She's prickly and she's really only looking for sex, not true connection, which proves challenging when she ends up hooking up with a guy named Eli, who just so happens to be attempting to take over the company that she loves. So we've got some fun corporate angst, we've got lots and lots of fucking, which I think is where this book loses a lot of people, and I get it, I really do. I bitch publicly on the internet about books peppering in sex scenes every couple of chapters in romance where it is unneeded. But in this book, I think it was needed for these two characters and their journey together. Rue is unwilling and incapable at the beginning of the book at opening up on an emotional level. It's only through communication during sex and after it she is able to open up about herself and her past. At least that is how I personally interpreted it. And again, I know so many of you have interpreted this book differently or have skipped it altogether because of the early reviews and again, the rampant smut. But I think Ellie Hazelwood would have to kick me in the shins to get me to stop enjoying her stuff. Even then, I have really strong shins, so I honestly can't guarantee it. I gave this book 5 stars, and I'm putting it between Play Along and Daydream. Are we seeing the 5 stars stack up? Sometimes you kiss a cowboy at a bar, and sometimes that cowboy turns out to be the nepo baby of the guy that you're doing design work for. Ada, our heroine, is not looking for anything serious after a failed marriage, but Wes, our hero, is happy and lovely and wants to bone emotionally. And they eventually do that. I don't know what about this book makes it not fun to talk about. Probably the vibe. It's a solid romance, right? We've got great mental health rep, but it wasn't something that was particularly memorable for me. I wasn't swooning for the hero and heroine. I wasn't just hoping that they kiss, especially 9 months after reading. I do appreciate this book for being a yeehaw romance with a lot of heart, and I really do love the passion that this author has for cowboy romances in general, but it's just not something that I want to gush about or bitch about. This book is a 4-star romance, and I'm giving it that rating based on my rating back in March, and I'm gonna stick this one ahead of The Paradise Problem, but after Daydream. I'm gonna be so fucking for real with you. I am 50% into this book, and it is giving me such a hard time, probably the hardest time of all of the books that I'm reading for this video, which I didn't necessarily anticipate, but that's okay. I picked this up to read physically a couple of different times over the past week, and it has been challenging for me to get into. I think because it's told in third person, I think just because of the writing style, wasn't connecting with it personally. I also didn't really have a good time with the first book in the series, so that's not super surprising, I guess, but I'd heard that this one was better, so I picked this one up. I had to use an Audible credit because I just couldn't do it anymore, okay? This book's about Noah and Hazel. I'm gonna hold it up. Hazel works at a bookstore, the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. There's cinnamon buns every Sunday. And you know what? I don't like calling them cinnamon buns. They are rolls. Cinnamon rolls. Someone has been leaving Hazel clues at this bookstore about how she can potentially live a more exciting life, right? She's like having a midlife crisis in her 30s. I guess she just turned 30 and she feels like she's never done anything. She's never like fun flings or explored anything. And she feels like she's behind in life, okay? All of the people around her seem to like have a person or kids or whatever. She does not. So she's finding these clues in the bookstore. In books, right? Like this is a new bookstore, not a used bookstore, and she's finding books that have highlights in them, which is crazy. And they're like highlighted passages about having fun and living loose. And so she's trying to figure out who's leaving these clues for her while also having a good time with Noah the fisherman, who's outgoing, fun time, and sleeps with out-of-towners and doesn't really like anything serious, but he has a crush on Hazel and he wants to help her have a good time, sexually and otherwise. Here's my problem with this book. Like stakes and tension in my books. I know. I'm so glad that people are talking about books with no third act conflict or third act breakup. I like that books like that or cozy fantasies or cozy whatevers are becoming more popular for the people that enjoy that sort of thing. I am not one of those people, unfortunately. As much as I would love to, as much as I love the idea of it, I thrive on stakes, tension, conflict, pining, all of that shit. I want to die for my characters, right? Like, I want to read people miscommunicating and want to shake them because they're so meant for each other, you know? Like, that's my shit. This is not my shit. These two characters, they're communicative from the beginning. They kiss very early on. It's such an interesting juxtaposition too of basically nothing happening, it being cozy, and there also being quite a bit of like physical intimacy, shall we say, early on in the book. And again, I'm not a prude. Personally, I like smut in my books, I sure do, but I just don't care when there's nothing to get me to care, when there is no relationship development to back it up, when there's no stakes and tension leading me to that place. The tension breaking is what's exciting to me about smut in books. Something about the way that this book is written is challenging for me, and I don't really know if I can put my fingers on it. Fingers, that sounded weird. I don't know if I can put my finger on it. My singular finger. I feel like it could be the third person point of view, so dual POV, which is interesting. It could be that. It could just be the actual prose. I think it really is the actual prose of this book that I'm having a hard time with. So cut and dry. Nothing is described. I feel like I'm being told and not shown anything. Again, where is the chemistry between these two characters? Like, I'm being told, oh, he is so handsome. Okay. I don't give a fuck. I'm sorry. I didn't think this would be the book to break me. I really didn't, but it is. And, you know, I don't feel so bad about that, considering that I am enjoying all of the other books, and I don't think that my review of this is going to make or break whether or not you pick it up. If it sounds like something you're going to enjoy, if you like a low-stakes romance, this could be your thing, especially, again, because it is smutty. I think that's missing for a lot of these low-stakes romances that have existed for many millennia, right? Coming to the forefront now in a sexier, you know, package. And that's good for the people, again, who like it. I will finish it. Do I give a fuck about either of these characters? Absolutely not. I really don't care about their journeys. Noah wants to become a landlord, which is really not doing it for me. Noah does, in fact, get his dream, his wish to be a landlord. Now, is he a regular landlord or is it for vacation rentals? I couldn't tell you. I wasn't paying that close of attention to like the epilogue ending of this book because, again, I don't know how many times I can say it. I just don't care. This book, it just didn't do it for me. It didn't do it for me. Here's the thing though. If you are into this sort of thing, if this is your sort of thing, you don't need me to tell you to read it, right? Like, you're gonna pick it up either way. It doesn't have my stamp of approval, let's just put it that way. I feel like this book was smutty and low stakes, and the conflict was ultimately meaningless. No, there's no buts. There's really no buts. I feel like I'm being so dramatic. And I think that part of that is because all of the other books, as I am creating the graphics for this video whilst reading this and ranking things and doing all these things, I'm realizing that the majority of these books are in the 4 and 5 star range or the high 3-star range, right? There are so many fantastic books that were nominated this year. Even if I know for sure, like, my favorites aren't going to make it even to the top 10, there were really great books nominated, right? So there's not much to be mad about. When stuff like this sneaks in, I just question it because there are very many great books that I read this year that weren't nominated. It just begs the question why. And I know why. I've said in multiple different ways why this got nominated. That is simply because it is different. And you know what? Maybe it's ushering in a new era of these low stakes, cozy romances. And for the people, again, that are into this sort of thing, I am so happy for you. It is simply, however, not for me. And so it puts me in a weird situation. Not really. I just don't know where to rank this. I think this is like probably 2 or 3-star romance for me, rating wise. But where do I rank this amongst the other delightful gems that we've been reading? I think, looking at what I have in front of me, I'm going to put this between Lies and Weddings and The Pairing. Because here's the deal. Was Lies and Weddings a romance? Not really. But did I actively enjoy it more than The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore? Also, yes. I'm kind of going against my own rules in that regard. Like, if I were going off of the, is this a romance? Because if it's not a romance in my eyes, it's going to be at the end of the list. Fucking up my rules by putting this between Lies and Weddings and The Pairing. Possibly. Do I care? No. Are we ready to talk about the winner of the Goodreads Choice Awards? I actually haven't been spoiled for the Goodreads Choice Awards up until this point. I am just, in fact, a realist. And the realist in me says that Emily Henry could call your mom ugly to your face, and you'd probably be like, yeah, she has a point. This book is about Daphne, not the red Scooby-Doo fruit snack, but the wronged heroine of our not-so-funny romance. She's dumped by her fiancé Peter at the beginning of the book because Peter's BFF Petra, during his bachelor party, professes her love for him. And since Petra has big naturals, she doesn't, I'm actually just making that part up, he decides to leave his longtime love, who's abandoned her life in another city, to move into a house she doesn't own. Yikes. Obviously, Daphne has to go. She can't live in this house anymore because the guy who abandoned her wants to live there with his new lady lady love. Anyway, Daphne happens to land a really sick place, living with Petra's ex, Miles. And Miles is kind of gross, but since Daphne's hit rock bottom, she is intent on making this roommate situation work. And over time, the forced proximity of it all kind of makes them compatible. I can begrudgingly admit that there is some decent character development done to make them compatible. I did give this book 4 stars. I know it sounds like I'm trying to dunk on it, but this is really one of her more decent books. Is it award-winning in my eyes? No, not at all. There's too much side bullshit from the various family members who like come into the book, but at least it didn't piss me off. So this is going between Daydream and Swift and Saddled. Rejecting the family funeral home business to pursue your passion of selling flowers is both ironic and iconic. But that's about where my compliments for A Love Song for Ricki, Wilde end. This book is about Ricki, who is expected to open her own funeral home franchise. I guess each of her elder sisters has done it, and they're also kind of like popular on social media for like having this family business. Ricki is not lured by the sweet smell of embalming fluid and instead wants to strike out on her own, sell her own flowers. She decides to open up her shop in Harlem after striking up a deal with this really kind old lady to rent out the bottom of her brownstone. And from there, Ricki's life gets really exciting because the flower shop is super popular and she has a man who she has a chance encounter with, who she falls in love with, and there's some dual timeline magic. We're introduced to another gentleman who is alive during the Harlem Renaissance. It's like set in the past, the dual timeline is, I should say. And as the book carries on, we see how these two timelines kind of converge. And I'm not going to tell you how or why that happens, but what I will tell you is that I really enjoyed learning about the Harlem Renaissance. I really did enjoy the dual timeline aspect of this book. Only that timeline, I should say. The vibes were so strong in that past timeline. Present timeline, however, I just felt so insta-lovey and sort of fated mates in a way that I just don't think translates well to a contemporary romance. I just honestly didn't care much about Ricki's journey. I felt like her whole flower shop finding her own identity thing, I don't want to say it was played out, but the way that it was executed didn't feel unique, it didn't feel original, and I just ultimately didn't care. Which is tough because I really did enjoy this author's last book, which also had sort of like a magical feel to it. I just feel like that one did it a little bit better. As a story, I did appreciate this book because again, I liked the Harlem Renaissance stuff. I thought that was great. As a romance, I was left wanting more. So I gave this book 3 stars, and I'm going to be putting this between How to End a Love Story and Lies and Weddings. Can I tell y'all a joke? You're a screenwriter whose career has taken a back seat because you are the sole caretaker for your disabled dad, and you get the opportunity of a lifetime to go and help your favorite screenwriter revise a rom-com that he's writing. He's never written a rom-com before, you love rom-coms, you're hyped. Except when you show up at his house, he doesn't know you're coming. He insults you, he insults your looks, he insults your talent. Ha 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 ha. This book, y'all, I thought Hella Stranger was going to be the last book that I didn't like from Catherine Center because I liked all of her books up until this point. But unfortunately, it seems like this is the new direction that this author is heading in. The book is about Emma, who is helping Charlie revise his screenplay. He's a cranky fuck who is really bad at communicating his feelings and is recently divorced. He doesn't want to write this rom-com, but he's being forced to write it so that he can get a different project greenlit, and he makes this known repeatedly by taking out his frustrations on Emma. I'm filming these sit-down clips after I read all of the books, if that wasn't totally clear. I can say resolutely that this is the book on this list that pissed me off more than any other. It might be my least favorite book that I've read this entire year, which I think goes to show how generous I am as a reader and reviewer because I'm awarding this book not 1 but 2 stars. This is going before the pairing only because I finished it. We're reading an interesting one, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. I'm 50% into The Love of My Afterlife. Had I known that this was British going into it, I think I would have prepared myself a little bit differently, mentally. I was thinking this was going to be more The 7-Year Slip and less Josie Silver. Unfortunately, it's very much giving Josie Silver. While I'm enjoying this more than I've enjoyed any is it Josie Silver? That sounds so similar to Elsie Silver. While I'm enjoying it more than most British rom-coms that I have read, I can't say that I'm adoring it. So this book's about our main character, Delphi. Delphi is kind of pitiful. She is someone who has not lived her life to the fullest, which I think is pretty necessary for a book like this. And she is choking on a microwave hamburger and it leads her to heaven, or heaven's waiting room, the afterlife, whatever. And in conversations with her like guide to the afterlife, she figures out that she can find a way back, but only if she finds her soulmate when she's back on Earth in the next 10 days and can convince him to kiss her. And by convince him, I mean she doesn't convince him. She's not supposed to convince him. He is just supposed to, of his own volition and of his own accord, want to kiss her, right? While she is in this like afterlife for like the first chapter of the book, she ends up meeting a guy who she finds really handsome, you know, develops some sort of connection with very quickly. And this is the only man that she's ever developed a connection with, but Unfortunately, there's a mix-up. He's not actually dead. He's not actually in the afterlife with her. That's why she wants to like get back to the real world. It's not because her life's like worth living. She wants to find her soulmate. She's promised that she will be able to find him, or that she should find him, and she'll be able to stay on Earth past 10 days if she finds him and he kisses her. And Delphi's back on Earth. Delphi is going to track down this man. She is going to have him fall in love with her because that's just like how this whole thing's gonna work, right? In doing so, in being back on Earth, Delphi runs into a lot of obstacles trying to find this man. She knows his first name, she doesn't know his last name, and that obviously proves challenge. She does eventually find out who he is, but then she can't exactly find him because he is constantly working different jobs or volunteering at children's hospitals because of course he has to be like the perfect man. In her search, she ends up kind of enlisting the help of her grumpy neighbor who she kind of can't stand and who's kind of a ladies' man. His name is Cameron, I don't know, starts with a C. I think that this is actually who she's going to end up with. Wish for the life of me I could remember. Oh, no, I can. I was gonna say, I wish I could remember what book this is reminding me of. It's reminding me of Hello Stranger from last year, where our heroine is like trying to get in contact with this guy that she's in love with, and she's like using her shitty neighbor to help her do that. And it turns out the shitty neighbor is the guy she's in love with all along. This is not gonna be the same. Like, the guy that she's hunting down is not the same guy that is living in her apartment complex, but the guy in the apartment complex who's like kind of shitty is the one that I think inevitably she is going to end up with because she's spending the most time on page with him, and it wouldn't make sense to like have him on page for this long if that's like not the guy she's gonna end up with. So I don't know how I feel about this. Conceptually, I was kind of on board. I mean, I've opened my heart, you know, I've opened my mind to accept more like magical scenarios in my contemporary romances. I have a hard time suspending my disbelief. What can I say? I'm boring. I don't know if I can suspend my disbelief this much for this one. It's not the afterlife situation, again, that is turning me off from this book. It really is the fact that our author's trying to do like a bait and switch and it's just like so obvious that we can see through it. I kind of wish that our heroine had just choked on the burger and stayed dead. I don't know. I also kind of thought that our heroine would like develop more of a social life as the book goes on, but like in some of these scenarios, right, she's like at a bar looking for her dream man and she gets put in a situation where she's supposed to do karaoke. She chickens out and I'm like, okay, well then how is she like learning to live her life better? Is this book really just about her falling in love? I thought it was like falling in love but also like learning that she needs to like live a better life, you know, kind of Midnight Library style. But maybe not. Maybe like that's not the purpose of this, but I have to say I'm a little underwhelmed. I am no longer underwhelmed. I am in fact overwhelmed because this book was such an interesting mix of like Josie Silver meets like Bridget Jones' Diary. Almost immediately after filming that last clip, shit got really weird in this book. We do get more of Delphi and Cooper. I finally figured out the hero's name. It's giving dog, but that's fine. Delphi and Cooper are spending more time together and they're fake dating so that Cooper does not look alone to his family because his twin sister has died. He's been a little bit like reclusive since that happened. But the lengths that Delphi goes to in the rest of the book in order to find her soulmate Jonah and like finally meet him are really, really cringe. Confrontation with him induced what I can only describe as the worst secondhand embarrassment that I've personally ever experienced. And aside from that, I started to realize that Delphi is actually kind of an asshole. I feel like I misread her character at the beginning of this book. I was like, oh, she's like pathetic and we should feel bad for her because she has been abandoned by her mom and she was like bullied in school. She is so rude to absolutely everyone in her life, especially the people who are very obviously trying to be her friends, that it made it kind of uncomfortable to read. You see the author's attempt to make Delphi into a person who is not awful. Like, she has multiple different facets to her by including the character of Mr. Yoon, who is Delphi's disabled neighbor who I believe cannot speak, and she kind of like babies him in a very strange way. Like, I think we're supposed to believe, oh, like Delphi is like such a kind person, but I feel like Mr. Yoon was a little bit infantilized and again felt a little bit uncomfortable to read about. Like, it was not the intent, I think, of the author. She definitely had a different intent when she was writing, but it came off in a different way, you know? There's really just too much going on in this book. You've got this lonely girl who is rude, but not to the elderly, and is constantly warring with Cooper, but also kind of might like him and kind of like fucks him, but she's also trying to track down Jonah. She also needs to confront her high school bully finally, also needs advice from her guide to the afterlife who like shows up every once in a while. It just spirals from there. I like to avoid spoilers in these videos, but honestly, I have to tell someone about this book. I don't know who else I would talk to about this book. The guide to the afterlife is Cooper's twin sister, which now that I'm saying it out loud, it doesn't sound that crazy, but in conjunction with the whirlwind of shit that occurs in this book, it's just the bizarre cherry on top of the bizarre sundae. This book is just really, really hard for me to rate because romance itself between Cooper and Delphi, I do feel like two bad people kind of deserve each other. Like, she is kind of a snarky asshole and he kind of appreciates that, and I mean, they really are meant for each other. But also, this kind of falls into that same weird category as How to End a Love Story, where I think the plot was just a little too bizarre to really stick the landing. So I think I'm going to put this one after How to End a Love Story, simply because I forgot to tell you, there's a sex scene in that book that I really liked. I'm going to put it ahead of A Love Song for Ricki Wilde because it was more entertaining. Have you heard the good news? Vampires and werewolves fucking is so back. Well, thanks to the only author who is appearing twice on this list, yes, the good doctor herself, Miss Allison Hazelwood. Bride is a paranormal romance that I was frankly surprised to see on this list because, well, I'm not used to seeing anything in this category except for contemporary romances, but I can't say that I'm mad about it. It's about our main character Misery, which honestly, great name for anyone, especially a great name for a vampire, and she is married off to a werewolf, Lo, because of a peacekeeping alliance. The trouble is, werewolves don't really fuck with vampires, so a lot of this book is spent with Misery trying to get to know a different species and trying to learn to adapt really quickly to her new situation, which might lead to her doing some werewolfy sex shit with Lo, and it might involve her falling in love with him and also biting his neck. This is just some of the most fun that I've had in a really long time. I'm obviously biased because I enjoy this author's work, but I'm also really obsessed with vampires and werewolves, and I will take any paranormal romance crumbs I can get, especially now that the only fantastical shit that we're getting is romantasy. I'm even able to overlook the dick that swells up like a water balloon. 5 inflatable stars. Let's put this one between This Could Be Us and Play Along. The only thing that is different about Carly Fortune's third book is the amount of oyster shucking. This book is about Lucy, who is besties with Bridget and visits her on PEI every summer. The uninformed, PEI is Prince Edward's Island in Canada. And every summer, unbeknownst to Bridget, Lucy hooks up with Bridget's hot brother Felix. And when Bridget is running away from her impending wedding, Lucy decides she's gonna go and try and see what's up, while also not resisting the dick very well, right? Just what I always wanted. Two people who have a lot of sex and never communicate about it. Plus, we have a really irritating situation where Bridget doesn't let Lucy know why she's running away from her impending wedding. Awesome! I just don't fuck with this author's writing, and I know that, and I accept that, and I read her books anyway because they're on these lists, and I gave it 2 stars, and I put it between the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore and the Rom-Commers. Leather and Lark by Bran Weaver. This book's about Lachlan and Lark, which I think there should be a rule against having alliterative hero and heroine names, but that is the least of our issues starting off with this book. I attempted to read Leather and Lark back earlier this year after I had finished Butcher and Blackbird. I DNF'd it because frankly it just felt too similar to the first book in the series. And as I'm getting farther into this one, after having DNF'd it before, I have to say it still feels so similar to Butcher and Blackbird for me, but like less fun. So this one again follows Lachlan and Lark. Lachlan is a hired killer who ends up like getting in trouble with his boss, and now he's unsure if he's ever going to be able to get out of this gig. He doesn't want to be a contract killer. He's not into it, but that's sort of his thing. And then we have Lark, who kills people for fun, and in one of these killing sprees, she ends up needing a cleanup. She ends up calling her family and she's like, hey, do y'all know anyone who can like help me? Because I guess her family's like a part of the mob or some shit. Lachlan steps in to help. She doesn't know who he is at the time. Later on, she figures out that Lachlan is the brother, her best friend's fiance, husband. I don't know what he is at the start of the story, but Lachlan and Lark don't like each other, but they have to get married as a sort of like marriage of convenience situation because she needs help tracking someone down and killing somebody, and she promises Lachlan that she will be able to get him out of his contract, his boss. I think that the plot of this book's kind of stupid. I'm not gonna lie to you. I think that is kind of my biggest issue with it. All of these books are going to be silly, right? Like the idea that anyone could get away with this, or that there is like a band of female serial killers who are all besties, like it's a little bit far-fetched for sure. But I think what is kind of not fun for me is the whole marriage of convenience situation. I'm feeling absolutely no chemistry between hero and heroine. I don't care that they're married. It's not like adding to the story or adding to the appeal of anything. Really, especially don't care about the fact that our heroine is a, what does she call it? Repeat deleter? Unaliver? Serial deleter? She comes up with stupid names to call herself because she doesn't want to call herself a serial killer. I just don't really understand why she kills people, you know? Heroine from the first book I kind of understood, but this one it's like, it's repetitive and it also doesn't feel unique, and I'm also just like, what are we doing? Maybe I just have an inability to suspend my disbelief. I think that's the problem here. This is never going to be a book for me. Let's be real. It was never going to be a book for me, but I did want to give the old college try, you know? Give her a second chance. I needed to know what this is all about. Frankly, I just don't get it. I'm just not dark romance girly. I'm not really into this sort of thing. What did I just read? It was supposed to be kind of similar to this. Oh, Lights Out by Nevessa Allen. That was similar, but I think more fun. arguably. Regardless, I don't know, this whole like dark romance meets humor thing, I can kind of get on board with it, but then I just remembered that the plots are nonsensical, could never happen in real life, and then I just kind of like don't care. You know, it's for somebody. It just sure ain't for me. And it surely continued to not be for me. Though I can't admit that the chemistry in this book does pick up a little bit as the book carries on. I think it was just a little shallow and relied maybe a little bit too heavily on the sex scenes and the idea of my wife that kept coming up. What is it about these like marriage of conveniences where the hero, after he becomes obsessed with her, is like, my wife, especially like while he's pounding into her? For what it was, it did a decent job, but what was far from decent in my opinion was the audiobook for this one. I really thought that I enjoyed duet narration, which is where you have a like male and female narrator, if it's a, you know, male-female romance, during like male POV chapters, for instance, when we have a dude narrating. We also have the woman come in and narrate her dialogue pieces. And in this one, I kind of wanted to like bash my skull in with a rock because the amount of giggling was incessant. And I don't think that you should be making fun of people's laughs in real life because, you know, you want people to like feel like they can laugh around you. But I feel no qualms in saying that this was like pretty insufferable. And when I posted about it on my Instagram story, a lot of y'all replied and said the giggling really took you the fuck out. Additionally, during some of the sexy scenes, it felt a little bit Skinamaxy because we had a lot of moans while the hero was narrating from the female audiobook narrator. And I'm not saying she did a bad job. I'm not saying she's a bad audiobook narrator. I think she's one of the most popular, you know, good for her. I think it was just a combination of things. It was really the combination of the way the book was written and the choice of duet narration. So anyway, I feel like I've been going back and forth in this clip in terms of how I felt about this book. I didn't hate it, but I think saying that I enjoyed it would be a bit of a stretch. I think I'm gonna put this one above This Summer Will Be Different, but below The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. Now we've reached the end of the road and it is time to talk final rankings. When I look at this, honestly, I'm struck by how many more 3-star reads I had this year as compared to last year. Last year was a great Goodreads Choice Awards year in that I had a lot of 4- and 5-star reads, but I think I only had a couple of 3 stars and then like 6 to 8 2-star reads. The rift was really, really big between the books that I liked and the books that I didn't like. This year, however, the spread feels a lot better to me. I had 6 5-star reads, 3 4-star reads, 6 3-star reads, and 5 2-star reads. So essentially, I enjoyed 15 books and disliked 5 books. But the real question is, what books do I think are going to make the top 10? Because yes, I do love my personal taste in books, but I also enjoy being right. So I made a predictive top 10 based on what I feel like has been getting a lot of buzz this year. You'll notice I don't have Play Along in my predicted top 10 because while I really loved this book, I feel like I didn't hear many people talking about it and it's an indie, and I just feel like indies don't typically make it to the top 10. I also feel like this was a really big year for books like Leather and Lark and The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore. Even though I didn't personally enjoy them, both were enormously popular because they both served sections of the romance reading community that we haven't really seen much from lately, I think. Resurgence of dark romance in a more lighthearted package, and a cozy, smutty romance, which again, kind of a twist on a classic. I also assume Wilde Love's gonna make the list because Elsie is just really well loved. And then I have Funny Story, of course, in the top spot, winning because even the people who don't read romance read Emily Henry, and I feel like there are a lot of people who vote in the Goodreads Choice Awards who are not like genre lovers. Maybe they're a big fantasy reader, right? And they're going to vote in the fantasy category. They're also going to vote in the romance category because they did happen to read Funny Story this year, right? I don't know. I think seasoned readers might choose differently, but maybe that's just me. Pretty confident about my predictions and the order though, especially of the top like 3 or 4 books. Those really feel like the standouts, the classics, the books that everybody was talking about in 2024 to me. First, let's see who the winner is. This is my first time seeing this. I'm sure we're gonna be in for a shock and a surprise. Yeah, it's Funny Story by Emily Henry. I think this is the 4th time that she's won, and I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
That's too damn bad!
That being said, I did enjoy this one more than last year's M-Hen. Not like incensed or anything. And my winner was in 2nd place, which I don't know if that's ever happened. And if y'all are curious, because this is something that I was really curious about, last year I was able to correctly predict 8 of the top 10. This year I predicted 7 of the top 10. But unlike last year, I correctly guessed the titles and the orders of the top 3, which has me feeling good. Now, where did I go wrong? Let's talk through these, right? I thought that Daydream, This Could Be Us, and Swift and Saddled would make it to the top 10, again, just based on the things that I feel like I've seen and my own, you know, personal bias, of course. Instead, the 3 that made it that weren't on my list were Play Along, The Paradise Problem, and This Summer Will Be Different. Honestly, I'm not mad that Play Along made it to the list. It was a 5-star read for me, and to me, Play Along and Daydream were both just really excellent. Paradise Problem I enjoyed, so again, not upset. What does upset me though is that This Could Be Us did not make the top 10. It was ranked 15, which speaks to a couple of problems that I feel like we need to address. Primarily, the lack of diversity in the Choice Awards and ageism, honestly. It is no secret that the Choice Awards are a popularity contest, and they always, and I mean always, favor books that have cis, straight, white characters. Those books tend to get more votes. And I knew this, but I also felt like I saw more people talking about this book, in particular this year, so I was genuinely excited to see this one in the top 10, and was really shocked to not see it there. And I could just chalk it up all to the whole cis, straight, white thing, but I also think part of it is because the main character of this book is older. She's not in her 20s or her early 30s finding her first love. She's getting a divorce after having a family, and I believe she's either in her late 30s or early 40s. And when I think about the people that I follow on Bookstagram, which is where I feel like I heard people talking about this book, those people tend to skew older. Whereas I feel like a lot of the new romance readers to the genre, especially people who are coming from Book Talk, are in their early 20s and are maybe less interested in a story with an older main character. I guess it makes sense as to why this book wasn't talked about as widely as I would have expected given kind of what I'm seeing in my bubble, but it still surprises me. And also, I'm bringing all of this up because I feel like this is a book that I would have enjoyed even 10 years ago, even when I was a younger reader. And I really, really, really need more people to pick up Kennedy Ryan books. I like to think that everybody knows how genius her writing is. I'm surprised, again, to see that she's at 15. I know she doesn't write viral, smutty stuff, but she writes truly substantive, incredible, swoony romances. And after seeing her book this low on this list, it has me thinking a lot about the kinds of books that I want to elevate on my channel in 2025. Anyway, hopping off my soapbox for now, other observations. Honestly, I just really hope Not in Love finds its audience as well. Like, looking at the books that I picked for my top 10 versus the predictions versus the real top 10, I'm not that surprised or upset. I feel like in other years there have been more books that I wanted to make the top 10 that didn't, and in this case, like, I'm really not mad at what I'm seeing. I'm not surprised also that Not in Love didn't show up, but I really did love this book, and I hope more people are able to appreciate that even though it is really sex heavy, it does have a deeply romantic component to it as well. What are my takeaways from this Goodreads Choice Awards? They're not much of a surprise, as always. Lacking diversity, although a little bit better than last year with 2 Black authors nominated, though neither of those authors made it to the top 10, which is disappointing. More of my favorites made it to the top 10 this year than any past year, which I'm also very happy with. And honestly, when I look at the top 10, I think if you picked up all of these books, you would have a fairly decent representation of what 2024 was like in romance. Obviously with a couple of key players missing, but I think that's inevitable when you only are going to have like a top 10. The sheer amount of romance published this year is never going to fit neatly in a top 10, but overall, I think this was an interesting year for romance, and I'm really curious to see what's popular next year. Again, new genres and authors are emerging all the time, quicker than ever it feels like these days. Trends are moving super quickly, and I'm just really excited to see what 2025 has in store for us. But before 2025, let me know in the comments down below what your favorite romance of 2024 was. I'll also leave a link to a video that I made last month where I tell you my favorite romances of 2024 in case you need any more recommendations. There are a fair amount that came from this list. Well, not came from the Goodreads Choice Awards, but happened to show up in both places. But there are some other books that probably have never heard of or have never seen before. So if you need, again, more recommendations, you want to see what I thought was amazing this year, go ahead and check out that video. But that's it for me, y'all. Thanks so much for watching this video. Again, it's my favorite to film all year, and I'm always happy to do it for you. Love y'all so much, and I'll see you in the next one.